Hi there, I just wanted to do a quick video on push pins. I just finished quilting a couple rows of swirls and feathers. Swirls and feathers is one of the patterns where it has to meet up for the pattern to look right. You can adjust it and play with the pattern with swirls and feathers where it doesn't have to, but in this particular case we have some right angles where they're going to meet up to complete the image. Other patterns where this skill would be useful are clamshell patterns, crosshatching patterns, Baptist fan, a lot of those orange peel. The points have to touch, and when you're doing a larger quilt there is some shifting that can happen. Maybe your canvases aren't straight, maybe your backing wasn't straight. There's a lot of different factors that can affect how straight everything rolls, and so there's a method that you can do to help patterns line up after advancing the quilt. So I just finished quilting. Sewing is complete is still showing. The quilt's here. If you come and look, I'll show you the points. These are these right angles or 90 degrees, where in the previous row, my row is only about 6 inches. This is how they're supposed to meet. So this line comes down and looks like it goes into the next feather. This is just a scrap. I wasn't really, I just wanted it to be a dark thread so that you guys could see what I do next. So I'm gonna roll the quilt, leave a little bit of pattern visible depending on how many rows I wanted to quilt. Now it is important to note that when doing this, I might lean on the bar. So if I lean, you can see the quilt surface moves. So I have to be careful not to adjust too much. So if I do lean, I'm gonna line up my needle, and then before I push the push pin, I'm gonna make sure that the machine is still and that I'm not leaning on the roller and that everything's still lined up. But to get to that point, now this video is more about push pins. Of course, you would want to make sure the quilt is secure and not moving as much, so you would want to base your sides. You would want to use your side clamps, but for the sake of this method and this skill, I'm going to skip that stuff for now. So I've advanced the quilt, I've secured the quilt, I hit OK on our sewing, and just like regular, I'm going to pick a point near the middle of the quilt. I have my cup foot on, so again, I'm going to actually rotate that needle so it's touching, and it's right in a point that I can recognize, and I have the needle kind of get below that cup foot sorta to see that my needle's exactly in that point. I'm gonna go to the computer, and we have the TV set up also, but I'm gonna zoom in, and we did have some shifting. If you don't remember from previous videos, if we zoom all the way in, rolling on the roller on the mouse, these boxes now represent 1/4 of an inch. So in the grand scheme of things, if this is 1/4 of an inch and this much shifting has occurred, it's about 1/8. Not a huge deal for most edge to edge. For this one, it could matter. So we're gonna reposition, and that's my point. So you always wanna zoom in, especially with these patterns, until the screen stops as far as you can go. Pick the exact point, done. Now my needle precisely matches real life. Now, whenever you do custom quilting and complicated patterns, this red pattern doesn't really exist in the computer anymore. It might not be real life because things shifted. So our center is precisely on, but if we were doing this swirls and feathers, cross-hatching, clamshell, Baptist fan on a large quilt, there's a chance that that 1/8 of an inch could be 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 an inch on this end, up, down, or side to side. So to make sure that everything's gonna line up precisely, what we do next is come back to the machine. And remember, I lowered that needle, so I'm gonna raise it up again. If you have a front precision laser and not the cup foot, all of those things can help. So I like the cup foot on, I still do it with the cup foot. But what I'm gonna do is actually start all the way on the left side of the quilt. Again, this is smaller just for demonstration purposes. I'm going to be careful not to lean on the backing bar, and I'm going to reach with the machine, look down in that hole, and I'm gonna try to find that point. That point is most important to me in each repeat because that's where they need to touch. So I'm gonna lean, I'm gonna put that needle right on the tip of that point, and I'm gonna press the white button. I just tapped the white button. When the lightning screen is in Mach 3, the white button functions as a push pin. Our push pins are visual markers. So now I have a blue dot, and if we zoom in, you can see it's a little off. So we're gonna correct that. But I need to do the whole quilt. So we're gonna lift up and go to the next repeat. Do the same thing, let go of the machine so it's precisely in the right spot. Make sure you're not leaning. Drop another push pin. Now, if you like to, now that one's a little better, and that is a testament to repositioning in the middle of the quilt. So as we get closer to the point where we reposition, these are more accurate. Things didn't shift as much in the middle. I like to watch the needle as I go to make sure things line up. So there's a little tool in here under view. You can go to needle view, and in needle view, the machine will follow. So if I wiggle the machine, the screen wiggles. So it's going to follow wherever I move. So you can see it moving on the screen, wherever I move that needle to. So we're gonna go to the next spot, precisely on that point, and lower my needle, drop my push pin, almost dead on. Again, we're near the center of the quilt. Go to the next one, same process, letting go of the machine, not leaning on the rail, push pin. That one is pretty dead on. That's right next to our reposition point. Next spot, not leaning, let go, push pin. That one is dead on. Same thing, and that one's a little high. So now we have all these real life data points to relate to. Now when we're done, we can turn needle view off. So we go to view, uncheck needle view, and now I can zoom out and look. So I don't need these black lines, so I can actually open my push pin tool and uncheck connect while placing, and now I just have push pins as visual markers. There are a lot of different things that push pins do. For this particular purpose, we're using them just as visual markings. I'm gonna hit done, and now I'm gonna look at my points, and we're gonna see how these line up. If I needed to adjust, you can try using the Morph tool. There's lots of different things that we can do. We're gonna click on this row, we're gonna grab the Morph tool, and I don't know if you can barely see that I shifted that. It was lined up with the red, and I shifted it a little to the right. So I'm gonna grab that Morph button again, this purple handle, and I'm gonna shift a little to the right. And we want it right below that blue dot. Let's see how the middle lines up. Pretty much dead on. This one, could use a little shifting. If we're near the middle of the pattern, or if there's no, so here's a purple handle and I can slightly move it. Let's say the Morph tool is moving your pattern too much. In this case, the Morph tool worked really well. Even though it shifted a lot of the pattern, these are all lining up. All of my push pins, except for this one. This one's pretty high. So to fix that, we can actually go in further and morph a small section. So let's say only one was off. Maybe there's extra fabric in that spot. We can use our purple split and divide tool, and we can create a split point. So I'm gonna hit accept there, and then I'm gonna hit accept down here. Now, go back to stretchy arm guy, click on just this section, click the morph tool, and now I can morph just this one baby piece of the pattern precisely to that push pin. Notice starts and stops are still in the exact same spot, so none of the rest of the pattern was affected, just that small spot that we needed, because everything else lines up now, and we corrected this one. Now that we're done morphing just that section, we're gonna take a look at the pattern and see where the starts and stops are. Since the green is on the right side for this row, we're gonna click stretchy arm guy, the right side of the pattern, and we're gonna attach these sections of the pattern back together. So you always wanna click in the right order when you're putting it back together after a split. I'm gonna hit accept and zoom back out. Now, we only have to relate it to the previous row. The machine does a perfect job between rows as it's stitching with the next row and the next row. Now, I don't want to group those, so let me get out of this tool here. But it's going to precisely line up per throat space. So the more patterns you can do, let's say this was a wall hanging, if I make the rows smaller, the more that fit in the sew zone, the less times we're going to have to do this for the length of the quilt, because the machine's going to match those up. I just have to match every time I roll. So now I can link my rows as usual, only 2 fit, and then I'm going to trim my edges and quilt as normal. So with this method, of course, again, this is just practice. You want to baste, make sure everything is steady. If the quilt is lumpy, it's not a bad idea to do some extra basting stitches to prevent some shifting, but this push pin method should help you line up patterns a lot better. So thank you.